I'm Richard Plummer with Church of the Living God. I've been a member here since 25 years ago. In April of 1990, we were attending another church and we found need to leave. There was a group of us, approximately 16, and we did so. But we attended several churches trying to find us a home, but we were really distraught. We really didn't know what to do, where to turn.
Growing up, church had been very important in our lives. That was our biggest social group. That was the people that we relied on, the people that we turned to when we had troubles, and the people that celebrated with us. And when I was in college, our family made the decision to leave the church that I had attended all my life. That was a very disturbing time because you feel like everything you've known has been yanked away from you. You don't know, you feel like you're floating freely, you don't know where you're going to turn.
What I remember about the early days is being 19 years old and being raised in church and all of a sudden having nowhere to go. And during that time, several families started meeting together and we decided that we would become a church.
And we finally met in the living room of one of the families, and we decided to start looking for a church, or to start our own church. And of course it was in deliberation, but we weren't for sure. We were just a little antsy, I would suppose. But I do remember one night I had attended a church, I went by myself, and it was a Pentecostal church, and they were just having the greatest time. But I was sitting back in my chair, brokenhearted. And the Lord spoke to me and said, "This is not where you're to be. I have a work for you and your group. So just follow me and I will lead and direct you." So we started meeting in various places, such as the Kentucky Utilities Building. We met at the college library in Sequoia Village, but then we found that we could meet at Conkright Middle School, and we held our services in the cafeteria there. And our Sunday school we conducted out actually in the hallways, and we had Sister Vicki Prophet, Sister Wendy Plummer at the time, and then Sister Sarah Prophet taught the children's classes. It was a very difficult time, but as more people started coming to us, wanting to know our mission, what we were planning on doing, so in July we decided to start our own church, and not yet knowing the location. But we started saving our offerings and tithes, and then Brother Albert Prophet came to us one day and said that he had talked to the pastor of the Christview Christian Church, which is at the current location, if they were interested in selling.
I remember we had met for a long time, and then we decided that we wanted to be in a church. So my sister, Leanne, the Lord woke her up in the middle of the night and told her to wake my dad up and tell him to come here and look at securing the building. Well, when he did, the pastor of the church said that they were not interested in selling the church at that time.
1 week later, he called Brother Albert back and he said, "Matter of fact, we will sell." And so by this time, they were going to sell us the building for $150,000, which is what we had sold it for in 1986, 4 years prior. We had accumulated $15,000 since we had been meeting in the homes in the various places. So we started meeting as a group, business group, and in late July we said we will form a church, and we came up with the name Church of the Living God.
Linda Plummer and Leanne Prophet, we came down into the basement, and when I looked around the building, I said, this is the Church of the Living God. And
on August the 2nd, I believe it was, that we officially became Church of the Living God Incorporated. And then August the 5th, we got our Articles of Incorporation from Frankfurt, recognizing us as a legal church, and so we went from there.
One of the best times was when we came as a group into this building for the first time. It was such a worshipful service. Everyone was praising God for all that He had done for our church. And that is one of my fondest memories, is the blessings that we felt when we knew that we were in a building, that we had a church, and that everything was going to be okay.
In the spring of 1991, I was pastoring the Faith Temple Church, Pentecostal Church of God in Danville, Kentucky. I'd been there in my 5th year at that point, but yet I was feeling in my spirit a stirring that God was going to make a change. As a matter of fact, in May of that year, God spoke to me very directly, one of the clearest voices I had ever heard from the Lord, and He said that there's going to be a change in October. And so at that point, I knew that my time there at that church was limited, and yet I asked 2 things from God. I said, first of all, I want my wife to be in complete agreement when that happens, and then also I want to know where we're going. I want to know your leading and your direction for that. And so I began to kind of bide my time, continue to preach. Our services were good throughout the summer. My wife sometimes would say, well, it was a good day. There was a good crowd, there was a good service, but God had taken it out of my heart.
We did have a young man who took care of this church when it turned into this Church of the Living God, that came and filled in until Pastor Hall. I think that he's the one that even talked to Pastor Hall about our church.
He called me and said that he had resigned the church and was going to evangelize, and asked me if I knew anyone that may be interested. And I actually gave him 4 or 5 names of friends of mine. But throughout that night, I just couldn't get it off my mind. And so the next day I talked to Leela about it, and I said, I'd hate to go to Winchester and 6 months from now wish we were in Danville. And she said, well, I'd hate to stay in Danville and 6 months from now wish that we were in Winchester. And so I knew that God was moving.
When we were at the older church, we were having some problems with our pastor, and things wasn't going well at all. But I had a friend, she was an older lady, and I was just in my teens at that time, but she was one who led me to know more about the Lord than about anybody else did. And so we had a prayer meeting time in the lower part of the church here. And as we prayed about the church, we was asking God to send us a man that would take care of us, and that would be a true worshiper of God, and just make our church a church that it ought to be. And so later when we was talking about that, I was talking about that to Pastor Hall, about the time that it was, and that was the very time that he said that he was born. He didn't know, of course, with a new baby, you don't know what your life's going to be like. But we decided that he was the one, if he was born at the same time that God was answering my prayer.
So we did schedule a time. We came up and met with the pulpit committee and talked with the board, went and had supper afterwards, and just asked God to have His way. And so we received the call on October 20th of 1991 that we were in fact accepted as the pastors here.
And when he came, I was on the board, and of course I was there with the meeting to say that whether that we wanted him or didn't want him or whatever. But after knowing that the Lord had already told me about this, I knew it had to be him.
And it's been a great 24 years for me. It's just such an honor to be here 24 of these first 25 years. And it's just been a wonderful trip. There's been some great highs and some intense lows. There's been times of battle and times of blessing. But overall, the progress has been steady, it's been sure, and it's been under the hand of God.